Welcome to Wisdom Unlocked, The Ways of God, a production of Lion's Share, a ministry that aims to co-mission with Jesus in making disciples of all nations. We ignite and provide resources to disciple makers in the church and throughout the vocations. In our world today, there is more information available than at any time in history, but wisdom is in short supply. In this podcast, you'll hear how learning about the character and ways of God is a guide to wisdom.
Hey everyone, this is Sonia Bierson, and Merry Christmas a few days early to you, our listeners, and to you, Dave Buring.
And to you, Sonia Bierson. What are you doing for Christmas?
Good question. We're pre-recording this, so Christmas isn't actually at the forefront of my mind, but I'll get there. I'm definitely going to still be doing some work, but also taking some time to do some traditions with my kids. One thing we always do is we make this Norwegian Swedish baked figure 8 cookie, though it's kind of more like a bread, and I only do it once a year. It is so labor intensive.
Yeah, sure.
It is truly a labor of love.
Yeah.
And as much as I wish they would forget that I'm supposed to make that, they always do.
Which means it's a success.
Yes.
That's good.
And we always do a happy birthday Jesus cake on
Christmas
Day. And of course, it's angel food cake.
Nice.
Yeah.
Do you name the cake Gabriel or what do you?
Hey, as long as it's not devil's food cake.
Exactly.
Yes. How about you?
So our big to-do is always Christmas Eve. Both Cheryl's family and my family, that was kind of the traditional gift-giving time. And so for us, that's having the whole clan at our house. So our kids, our grandkids all come over, and it's after church, usually 4 or 5 in the afternoon, come home and feast a little bit and then get to exchanging gifts. So that's usually a significant time for us.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, we were just saying that we're pre-recording this, but the week after Christmas is when I start shifting into a different mode. I don't know about you, but shifting from Advent and anticipation to remembering, recounting, reminiscing over the past year, and thinking, planning, praying about the next year.
Yes.
I really do get kind of quiet, maybe a little pensive, instead of, the New Year's Eve bash.
Yep.
Like it really does bring me into a different place. And so that's why I'm glad we're talking today about seeking God on behalf of your children. I think it's a great way to end this season where we've been talking about discipling the children in our lives. The practical aspects of discipling children in our lives and this new tool that we've introduced, a Discipleship Journey Kids, they're all really important, but they'll go nowhere if we aren't actively going to God about all this. So let's start, Dave, by talking about what you mean by seeking God on behalf of your children.
Yeah, and Sonia and I were talking before jumping on this, that don't just think children, be thinking teenagers here as well, because I think some of the stories that we'll share, Sonia has one teenager, another one knocking on the door of teenagehood next year. And, so be thinking of children and teenagers as part of your children as well. So seeking God on behalf of your children, what I mean by that is not just praying like for your kids when you put them to bed, which, as I'll get to here in a minute, is important. But it's, do you ever seek the Lord by spending time with the Lord, whether it's in your own quiet time or a time away, asking God what He wants to say to you about your kids? For example, one of the things that became a regular part of Cheryl's and my prayer retreats that we try to do a time or two each year is when our kids were in school, we wouldn't assume, and we've talked about this before on this podcast, we wouldn't assume that they're supposed to be back there next year. That was the plan, but we didn't assume that. We always just said, Lord, is there anything you're saying to us about that? So what I mean is a proactivity that's not just letting your kids grow up underneath, your roof, and then before you know it, golly, they're 18, they're out at college, it's like you've actually been seeking the Lord as you raise them to see what he's saying to you, how he wants you to interact into their lives, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think about it as not just the, here are the prayers that I'm throwing up, like, hey, I hope they're protected today.
Yeah.
Hey, I hope they get good grades, or they're able to, modify their behavior and be better, respectful, working citizens of the country.
Yeah.
Like not just kind of little throw up prayers.
Yep.
But bigger than that.
That's right.
Visionary prayers.
Yes.
You've talked about your mom in that context.
Yes. Yeah. My mom, I had the privilege of growing up in a home where my mom would get up at 4:30 in the morning to pray for her husband, 2 boys. It's my brother Tom and I, and things like our city where we were living, the nation, her friends, countries of the world events. And she, would record these in a little red notebook, and she'd go back every once in a while and check them off and date them when God answered them. And so I grew up in an environment where I knew firsthand what it was like to have a mom that sought the Lord on my behalf. And I can tell you that as she's now 89 and I'm 63, that it's actually made a very significant difference in my life. And only in heaven will I be able to see, maybe on, heavenly, the cloud or DVR or whatever they have up there, heavenly Blockbuster.
Now you're dating yourself.
I know. But to be able to actually see how those prayers that were prayed, and 1 John 5 tells us that if we pray according to the will of God, he hears us, and we can be confident in how he answers those prayers. So mom would pray according to the will of God. She wouldn't just fire up random prayers, but she would pray as she heard God guide her in how to pray for her 2 sons, her husband, and the other things I mentioned. So I think that's a very important piece, and I know it has been in my life.
Yeah, and we always talk about waiting on God and listening for his voice. That's a part of this too, listening to the Lord on their behalf, and maybe even helping them connect the dots on what you might have heard, right? Regardless of what they may have heard, or maybe they have heard something and you're coming in and confirming things. Yeah. So that piece of the conversation, I think, is really important too.
Yeah, I agree. So there's like language I like to use is there's praying for your kids, but there's also the praying over them. Like we would try to pray over the kids before they'd head out the door to school in the morning. And then there's this listening to the Lord on their behalf. And there were times that the Lord would give us things and we just keep our mouths quiet. And then maybe when they would come and ask or say, hey, I think da-da-da, we could say, actually we were praying about that and we got that same thing. And it was a cool confirmation for them that they also were hearing the right things.
You also say that praying over them includes fasting. Talk about that.
Yeah. This was something that triggered for us, maybe early teenage years for our kids, where when we started to see them kind of bump into the realities of the teenage life and some of the challenges that we begin to see them walk through, that Cheryl and I picked a day where we would fast breakfast. And so, we didn't make a scene of it when we were having family time over breakfast that we weren't eating, but we just didn't eat. And then once they got out the door, Cheryl and I would just take the next 20 minutes, half hour, kind of built it into our schedules to do that, where we could just fast breakfast and pray for them. And that was a very significant time. That was also a place where when we go back into our journals and look, we'll find the dates and things that we actually wrote down that the Lord shared with us. I still have somewhere on my iPhone in my notes one of the original times back in 2000, 2001. So it got carried over into notes over the years as I, moved information from phone to phone, of when we had said, okay, Lord, would you show us what you're saying to Ryan? Would you show us what you're saying to Malia? And then at some Christmas getaway we had, when they were like maybe a senior, Ryan was a senior, Malia was a sophomore, we submitted some of those things to them. And actually, Malia would have been 9th grade. And we submitted those things to them, just said, here's some thoughts that we want to submit to you. We didn't throw it on them, make them feel like this is it. We just said, here's some things we want to submit to you. And I've kept some of those things because every once in a while I watch just to see, okay, God, how are you going to do that? Some 20 years later.
Part of this seeking God on behalf of your children or children in your life, because this is not just a conversation about parents, is tending their calling.
Mm-hmm.
So we've talked a little bit this season about teaching children that they have a role on God's team, that they have a mission for their life, a calling on their life and purpose and even gifts. So what do you mean by tending their calling?
So let me read a couple of portions of scripture here that I think will just help context. So Psalm 139, verses 13 to 16 says this. So think about this as an adult with a child, your grandchild. It says, for you, this is David speaking, for you formed my inward parts. You knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. And so we see this whole dynamic of God pouring something into us when we were yet in our mother's womb, knitting us, weaving us together in such a way that he's tying in the giftings, the callings, the pieces of our lives that he will express himself through. Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 4 and 5 says this, now the word of the Lord came to me saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I consecrated you, I appointed you a prophet to the nations. Like, think about that. So before he was formed in the womb, God knew him, and before he was born, he had appointed him, consecrated him, set him apart as a prophet to the nations. Have you ever thought about your child or that child in your life or that grandchild in your life and just paused as you're looking at them, just kind of as they're eating their cereal, watching something on Saturday morning in their jammies? Have you ever just looked at the profile of their face and realized before they were born, God knew them and he placed a calling on their life. And it's part of our job to tend that. So John the Baptist is another one in Luke 1, where it talks about, again, he was filled with the Holy Spirit from his mother's womb. And so he, again, was called to be a prophet. And so I think those things in Scripture, Sonia, help us realize that when it comes to our children or the children in our lives, that we need to realize that just like we're focused on fulfilling our God-given mission and calling, we have to realize there's a seed of that already born in the children that we're walking with.
Yeah, and you're the first person who regularly used the language of tending with me. And I think the phrase that I'm used to is like tending your garden. Mm-hmm. And you were the first person who used kind of the language of tending your relationships, right? Tending your relationship with your friend or with your parent or with your spouse. And so when I think of tending their calling, to me, that means that you're aware of it, that you're constantly on the lookout for it. Mm-hmm. And you are, I think with children, you have to kind of keep pointing at it. Yeah. Not saying, I see these qualities in you, and that means you're going to be a firefighter, right? Like, if it were me, I'd be like, no, I'm not going to be a firefighter. Yeah. Like, don't tell me what I'm going to be.
Exactly.
But I think that when I point certain things out to my children, not, oh, you're so handsome to mommy, not that. When I point out certain qualities or attributes that I see, there may be some kind of, hanging up their head or whatever, like, oh, mom, there you go. But there's also a little bit of a standing up if it reaffirms maybe what they're already thinking about themselves. Mm-hmm. And I try to make those comments in such a way where it's not leading to a job or a profession, but more just saying something like, hey, I noticed you're really loyal to your friends. Or, you get angry but you always come back. When you're talking to mom or dad, you're very sensitive to the fact that we feel hurt, or you're really good at arguing. And you're really good at standing up for yourself. You might be wrong, but you're really good at it.
Yeah.
And being able to point those things out, there's little seeds.
It's huge because, again, often what's affirmed is, and they should be, the skills, the giftings, the grades, meaning the performances. But one of the things that is not focused on as much as I think it needs to be, and I'm speaking like from a biblical paradigm, is the affirming of people's characters. And when we see something that is in line with godly character and reflects, think of godly character as a reflection of God through your character. And when you see that in your child, I think it really is important that you pause and you build that in. Like our daughter, one of the things that I still am amazed at times because of some of the things that have happened to her is how forgiving she is. And it's not the, I feel sorry for them. It's a genuine, ripped up, clean slate, let's go. And how quickly. It's like not everybody can do that. And to be able to affirm, her in that. I think with Ryan, I remember how Malia tended when she was little to just speak her mind, and she still does that. It's part of the trait of who she is. You don't have to guess what she's thinking, so that's always a good thing. I guess her husband might want to see that changed a little bit. I don't know, but you never have to guess, right? And I'm teasing, and then Ryan was always the more discerning. Like before he would say it, he would kind of read the room, see what the situation is, and then let it come out of his mouth. And I began to recognize those things when they were like probably junior hires. Malia was late elementary school, Ryan was junior high. But I think the things that Sonia is underscoring here, it's really, really important. And I guess, can we just encourage you, if this kind of stuff is not on your radar, it can be really fun. Pull out a journal, and when you see these things, just start writing them down, because when they get older, and then you can affirm and say, hey, look, I started seeing this in you when you were 8, and now you're 32. Look at this. That thing's been in your life for a long. It just becomes an incredibly affirming thing to them.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's almost like an intentional muscle you have to build.
Yeah,
because
true.
In the busyness of life, it's really easy to just talk about what your kids are doing wrong.
Yep.
And so that idea of, catching your kids doing something right, that's an act of the will. It's a decision that you as a parent have to do to take the time to observe what they're doing right. So to me, this is very similar to that. Not that you're just catching them doing something right. You're catching it when you see something of their character.
Yeah.
And just planting that seed.
Yeah.
But it's not something I would normally do. And so I think that reminding myself, just as we're talking through this episode, reminding myself to do it, and also using and incorporating that into my prayers of blessing over them as they're going to bed, that's maybe a great little reminder for me that if I haven't done it during the day, that's the time to express it, to pray it over them.
Well, and I think, we've said this, I think, somewhere on some podcast before that, and I don't know what it is these days. It used to be it takes, 6 or 7, 8 or 9, whatever it was, affirmations to kind of cancel out that one negative thing. And I was just with an artist friend of mine who I've known. He actually sang in our wedding, and he was in town, and him and his wife and Cheryl and I had a meal, not last week, but the week before. And he was saying, as an artist who's a little bit more sensitive in his wiring, he said it's amazing because you could get 65 affirmations. And you get one person that just goes, I didn't really like that song. And he said, that's the one you remember. And we have to be affirming of our children. It's like, and again, I think you used a good word with there. We have to be a bit visionary with our kids and realize, okay, this little quality right now, like you were just saying, you're really good at arguing. Okay, well, we don't know what God's calling on a particular child who has that temperament might be, but my guess is there's going to have to be some level of standing up for right and wrong. And so it's being able to not always just tell them, would you stop arguing? But it's being able to say, okay, Lord, how do you want me to handle this? Do I need to just listen and turn that arguing into a conversation? Do I just need to end it by saying, you know what, hadn't thought about it. You could be right. And sometimes that's hard, particularly when you're giving them an instruction and it's kind of more a rebelling argument than it is just a character quality thing. But affirmation, like, can we ever affirm our children enough in light of the world that we live in?
On top of doing that, I think you have a couple of other suggestions here of exposing them to various kinds of opportunities, exposing them to different types of people or needs or even different types of tasks. I think this is really good because you're taking them out of their normal context and then seeing how do they do, what talents do they fall back on, what parts of them come out in the midst of that. And, don't just throw them in the deep end, right? Like there has to be some guidance along the way. A kid who may not enjoy greeting alongside you at church might enjoy, sitting and watching you create content, which is, that's the vernacular these days, of editing something together.
Yeah.
To give to someone else, maybe helping deliver a meal, whatever the case may be. You can see different pieces of that make them comfortable or not comfortable, that they naturally lean toward and not. So the affirmation part, just in general, in normal life, but also in these other opportunities.
Yeah, and you know what, Sonia, when I look back and see the pathway that God led me on, like I remember I was probably 13, 14, 15 when I first was drawn to, we'll just use the broader term today, the realm of communication. And the only thing I knew was radio or television broadcasting. That's the only thing I could, understand that to mean. And part of that was, so my dad used to work at a Christian radio station as he went back at 39 to Bible college. He had a job there. He'd done some of that in the Army, and then he was doing that. And he did a late night, early morning show. And so sometimes on a Friday night to Saturday morning, I would go and do a light in the night show with him at KTIS in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And Dad would be in the studio, and it had glass around it. And in the middle was a little conference room, and that was also glass. And then there was another studio that was just a little smaller than the one that he was in. And I remember sitting in there and learning how to do certain things. And that little invitation of, do you want to come with me? Like Dad had no idea, I'm sure, but that little invitation to do that pulled me into the arena where I have spent the rest of my life. And it might not be in broadcasting, but in public communication and speaking. And it got teased to me as a 13-year-old. And so I think, don't be bashful to pull your child into some of the things that you're doing, because it might not be that they do exactly what you do, but it might put in seeds that God will use for something later.
Yeah. And as you do that, I think it's important as a parent to discern, okay, is this just a hobby? Or is this part of their calling? Or maybe it's just something that they enjoy. That's the part I don't know.
Yeah.
Because of the age that my kids are at.
Totally.
I don't know. This could just be a hobby.
Yep.
But maybe there is something there. So I like that idea that you have of taking notes, right? So you can kind of go back and see, okay, well, it's right. This was a hobby.
Yeah.
This is part of what they're really good at. The role that they play in their community, in their life. I saw that. I saw that earlier.
Yeah, and it can be, and part of this for me, Sonia, is I sometimes think, by the sweetheart, you can do anything you want to do. Like the spirit of that is good, it's affirming, but it's like if the child can't run a 100-yard dash, you can't say to them, if you want to do a triathlon, and be able to swim 2 miles, bike 150, and then run a 26-mile marathon, you can do anything you put and the child can't even run 100 yards. It's like we have to learn to just go, okay, that's probably not in their realm of giftedness. And I think we just have to live, how do I say this? I don't mean to say a little more truthfully, but I mean to say a little more truthfully or realistically, and is looking at your child through a lens and not encouraging them to pursue something that obviously the internal wirings of attitudinal kinds of things or giftings that they're not wired for, because all it will do is discourage them. Even though we're saying, you can do whatever you dream of doing. That's where, for me, I would rather get with their maker in prayer and say, God, what are the areas you want me to encourage them in? And then, as they get older, they'll figure out which things actually relate to a possible vocation in life and what is more maybe just God's given you an interest in that for refreshment.
That's the key right there that you just said. Ask the Lord what you should share and what you don't need to share. Think about how much wounding there has been for kids over the years. I can think of some things for myself. I'm sure you can think of some things for yourself that someone in authority, whether it was a parent or someone else, said that you can remember to this day. And maybe they were wrong. Right? Sometimes that's a channel. You said I couldn't do that. Here I am. I'm doing it. Right. And so what do you share? When do you share it? Do you share it at all? Mm-hmm. Am I sharing it because I want to be right later? Yeah. I think, like you said, just stepping back and of course asking the Lord especially if there's something you want to warn about. But I think in general, affirmation, that's not a hard thing to do. It just, you have to stop and remember to do it. You have to stop and think about it.
Well, and if you didn't grow up with it, being, if mom and dad weren't the verbal affirmers, and in my home, that wasn't the case. And I think in some senses, I'm not making this an excuse, but it's a reality that generationally, a lot of those that are now in their late 70s and 80s, it was more of pull yourself up by your bootstraps generation and responsible, and they just got it done. And now we've kind of swung all the way to the other side now, where you don't have a generation that knows how to rise up on their own and do things. But there's a balance in all of that, and it's learning how to do that. And you have to realize somebody, and this is the kind of the fear of the Lord thing for me, somebody is going to have their words be big in your child's ears who will pour out affirmation on them. Let it be you.
Yeah. So seeking God on behalf of your children, we've been talking about praying over them, listening to the Lord on their behalf, tending their calling, observing them, affirming them, and then serving as a gateway. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so one of the things that I've watched, not only with Cheryl and I, but I've watched with my peers as they've walked with their children, has been recognizing that there may be opportunities that God will give you to serve as a gateway to open doors for them. Now, I don't mean running the family business. Could that be one? Sure, but that's not what I mean here. What I mean is, what are things that God has given you that might be able to benefit them as it relates to their own future? For example, again, is there a passing on of skills or talents that you happen to have that you can be a bit more intentional with? Like, I had to realize my kids, from me, were never going to become the person that could crawl underneath, a car and work on the car engine and do it. It's not what I had. Now, my son has learned to do a little bit of that. My son-in-law is actually really good at all of that. But there are other talents and skills that I had, particularly in the relational areas, that I tried to pass on to my kids, of how you treat people, how you walk under authority, how you try to listen, how you try to be a friend, how to know when to pass something on and when to be quiet, those kinds of things. So, what are some of those things that you have that, without saying, hey, I'm going to pass this on to you, you just kind of do it in life. Excuse me, you just kind of do it in life. And you just let it kind of leak from your life to them because they're around it a lot. So that's a big one. And a second one for me that has really been huge is passing on your relationships. Like, I love the fact that my kids go to my friends that they knew when they were like 7 and 9, and now my kids are 36 and 38, they go to my friends specifically for something. Like my son and his family are heading out for a little adventure and they're needing to rent out their home. Well, they go to my real estate friend that they met when they were, Ryan had to be no older than 4 or 5. And now at 38, he's going to him because it's now his friend. And it serves them and it helps, that relationship helps them. And I think we just sometimes can take that for granted, that there may be some of your friends that as your kids get older, and then your friends or my friends in this case, they're getting older, but now they're older and wiser. And I like that my kids want to go to my wise friends and they help them. So I think that there's more to that than I think we even realize.
Yeah, so you talked about passing on your skills and talents, opening your relationships to them, opening doors that only you can. And I'm not talking about, hey, I'm opening the door to the governor's mansion for you.
Yeah.
There's other things.
Yeah. There's lots of things. And I think, every family has unique doors that God has given you keys to, and they're not all the same. And we can't compare them and go, well, this one is this one and more weightier and this. No, because the ones that you have, God has known what he's invested in you and the doors he's given you and how those may impact your children. So don't ever think, well, they're not nearly as important as Charlie and Susie's down the street. Don't compare yourselves. Just realize that God may use doors that only you can uniquely open to be able to bless your kids.
Yeah, and there may be resources on that front too. Maybe it's not necessarily financial, but it could be financial. It could be possessions that you have that you can pass on to them. I do think that even if you feel maybe a little bit that you don't have things in those areas to pass on, go back to number 1 and number 2.
Yeah.
Right? Go back to number 1, which is praying over them and for them, and go back to tending their calling. And you'd be surprised that serving as a gateway, that God will reveal to you, or that it may happen anyway, just organically, dynamically, it may happen that there are things that you pass on to them that you don't even know because you didn't think it was a skill.
Yeah.
You didn't think it was going to benefit them.
Yeah.
And it does. It's kind of a wonderful thing later on when, even as an adult, you look back and go, that boring thing that my parents always did, I actually learned something from that, and I'm able to use it now.
Yeah.
At Thanksgiving, my son said to me, "You're really good at small talk." And I don't really know if he meant that as a compliment or not. But, there was kind of silence at the table, and he felt like it was kind of awkward. And so he always knows that if there's empty space, I'll fill it, if it's starting to get awkward.
Yeah.
And so his way of mimicking me and following me in that was to make fun of the fact that I was trying to fill the space. And I said, I probably learned that from my growing up. I was a pastor's kid. I was meeting strangers all the time. They had to wait awkwardly with me while my parents were talking to someone else. And so you just kind of learn to make do with that situation. And that's ended up being a skill for me.
Yeah.
And who would have thought that when I was sitting in that awkward, church lobby situation,
totally.
trying to get through 5 minutes with someone I don't know, that would end up being something.
Yeah. It's a big deal. And I think, the other thing, Sonia, we have to punctuate in all this is, whether it's this whole area of praying for them, tending them, serving as a gateway, there's the discipling of your children. And that's where we've been talking about this whole season, is discipling your children. What are the things that God has passed on to you spiritually? Maybe think vocationally, maybe think skill set wise, that he might want you to pass on more intentionally to your children. Because walking in God's ways, knowing God's character, let me put it this way, that's always a win. passing those kinds of things on to your children. So my hope is that in this conversation today, we've given you some fuel as you begin to, as Sonia's pointed out, start thinking about next year, like incorporate that into a prayerful game plan of how in the following year now you are going to be more intentional in seeking God on behalf of your children. And I think you're gonna be amazed as the years pass by, the fruit of what will come from this next year.
So I guess that's our call to action, right? Pray about who God has put in your life, whether it's a child, a teen, even an adult. What role are you supposed to play in their life? This season we've been talking about helping children hear God's voice, discovering their spiritual gifts, being on mission with Jesus, becoming good relators. Is there someone that God is putting on your heart? Dave, if we feel that stirring, that impression in our hearts, what should we do? How do we respond? What does obedience look like?
Yeah, I think it's taking a next step. So it's like if the Lord puts something on your heart, can I just encourage you, feel free to pray about it for a little bit until you have a sense of peace about it. But then, like, the only way you're going to know is you have to step out. And when you step out, that's trusting God. That's acting in faith. And, if it falls flat, it falls flat. But if you don't step out, usually nothing ever changes. And so I just want to encourage you, seek the Lord, ask Him how He wants you to seek Him on your kids' behalf this year, and then get to it. And if it's, hey, you know what? As a couple or as friends or as grandparents, we're going to commit Wednesday mornings as a time that we're going to skip eating and fast purposely and intercede for children. Just start with that and then listen to the Lord as you pray for them. And if He gives you steps of obedience, then just take that. But your kids are precious, and those kids in your life, they're the next generation that God wants to pour Himself through to impact the world. Let's get on to coming alongside of them in a godly way so that God can do things both in and through their lives that we can celebrate in the days ahead.
Yes, and the next thing you're going to need is a tool. So we encourage you to pick up some of Lionshare's tools for the new year, whether it be for yourself or to share with someone else. We've been discussing A Discipleship Journey Kids, which is the book and the animated video series, but you can also begin your journey of spiritual formation with A Discipleship Journey, the adult version, or take someone else through it. If you've been thinking about how God wants to use your work, your vocation as part of your ministry, check out The Great Opportunity, Making Disciples of Jesus in Every Vocation, another book that Dave wrote that's available at lionshare.org/store. And our free gift to you is a subscription to Dave's Devotionals, a 2-minute daily devotion that focuses on God's character and attributes. It's so important to see God for who He really is. And what better time than the new year to make that a daily discipline? So download the Lionshare Leadership Group app on your phone or tablet and watch a devotional every day. Right, Dave?
Right. It's one of the things I get excited about for people is to use this. It's a free gift to you, as Sonia said, but you can watch it. You can just listen to it, whether you're walking, you're in their car on your way to work. I know there are parents that have said to me they go putting their kids to bed at night, watching that together with them, where they can just have a little conversation about God's character. So yeah, I really want to encourage you, get the app and begin to use it in the new year.
Well, thanks for joining us this season. Dave and I will be back in the new year with a new season of Wisdom Unlocked: The Ways of God. I'd like to give a special shout out and thank you to our sound engineer and editor, Jeremy McCoy.
Yes.
Mel Mills, who handles our newsletter, publicizing this podcast and everything else Lionshare does, also on social media. And Lionshare's executive director, Darren Beerson.
Isn't he your husband?
Yeah.
Wow, I thought so. Okay.
He is.
Same last name.
So thank you to him for making this podcast happen, and to all of you for listening. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Wisdom Unlocked: The Ways of God is a production of Lionshare, a ministry that ignites and provides resources to disciple makers in the church and throughout the vocations. To learn more about what we do and how we can help you, please visit lionshare.org. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Vimeo.